1952. Off northwest Australia are the Montebello Islands. This was the place chosen to explode Britain's first atomic weapon. The spectacular success of the operation furthers our hopes of peace, for it seems that by the possession of such deadly weapons, peace can be maintained in this troubled world.
For decades, civilization stood at the brink of annihilation as we endured the tensions, threats, and disputes of the so-called Cold War. Years later, parts of the UK carry resonances from that time. Once shrouded in secrecy, Orford Ness on the Suffolk coast is to this day one of the few places known where purpose-built facilities were created for testing atomic weapons and their components. After crossing the narrow, sinuous estuary of the River Old to Alford Ness, one is immediately struck by the vivid contrast between the verdant mainland and the vast, flat, seemingly empty, almost prairie-like expanse of pebbles. Interlaced by tidal fingers of reed-fringed pools and rising only 13 feet above sea level, this is Europe's largest vegetated shingle spit. For millennia, this 10-mile-long nose or ness of land has been a haven for wildlife and some rare, highly specialized flora. However, this unique peninsula has another, darker side to its past. Although owned by the National Trust since 1993, much of the area remains inaccessible to visitors. Here was once a secret hush-hush world where armed guards patrolled perimeter fences. Within, advanced weapons and munitions were tested. Revolutionary radio detection and ranging equipment, otherwise known as radar, then later the Anglo-American Cobra Mist long-range detectors were developed. And perhaps most sinister of all, it was here in Britain that the nuclear arms race of the Cold War cast its sinister shadow. Traditionally, the Ness provided space for animals to graze upon the reclaimed marshland. But from June 1853, when one of the world's first submarine telegraph cables was laid from Orford Ness to Holland, the Ness gradually assumed a different character. In 1915, the Armament and Experimental Flight of the Royal Flying Corps set up a small airfield. The distinctive black beacon building, also known as the Orford Ness Rotating Wireless Beacon, an early radio navigation system, was established in July 1929. In the following decades, a variety of weapons were tested at Orford Ness, including the effectiveness of guns fired into grounded aircraft, both friendly and enemy. A huge variety of tests were also conducted, including self-healing fuel tanks, high-altitude flying, gyroscopic gun sights, and artificial clouds. Here, Britain's first atomic bomb, Blue Danube, was housed in a purpose-built pit for testing. Rigorous tests were designed to reproduce the extreme conditions nuclear weapons would undergo before detonation, with tests for G-forces, vibration, impacts, and high temperatures. With the arrival in 1953 of the Atomic Weapons Research Establishment, or AWRE, trials continued at the test site until they ceased in 1971. Secrecy was essential, and to this day, old time-worn signs remain, prohibiting photography and sketching. Upon the near horizon, the gaunt skeletal silhouettes of the pagodas stand as sombre, science fiction-like epitaphs to the Cold War. These buildings were used for testing explosive design. To contain the effects of an accident, their architecture included an underground laboratory, a shingle bank, a reinforced wall, and a roof that would collapse as a lid to contain an explosive blast and debris. Authorities maintain that no fissile material was involved in the tests, although high explosive initiators were included. Devastating widespread consequences could have resulted from an accident, and one wonders what it must have been like to live in the shadow of such dangers in Orford across the narrow margin of water. With the introduction of a series of tactical and strategic nuclear weapons for equipping the RAF and the Royal Navy, including submarine Polaris missiles, research at Orford Nest diminished and many functions moved to Aldermaston. The establishment closed in October 1971. In July 1972, No. 2 Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit of the RAF began the decades-long task of clearing the range of unexploded munitions. Although the work ceased around 1986, to this day many unexploded munitions still remain on Orford Ness, and it's not considered safe to stray from the defined pathways, as from time to time the shingle reveals a suspiciously shaped piece of metal. Nowadays, only limited numbers of people are permitted to visit Orford Ness, both to protect the rich variety of wildlife, including nesting birds, and for reasons of health and safety. Visitors are made aware of the danger from unexploded ordnance. An air of desolation haunts the Ness, exposed as it is to the North Sea and the attrition of the winds. Abandoned buildings and the broken foundations of other ragged structures are all that remains of the research community that worked there. In this flat landscape, the few buildings that remain stand stark against the sky, tending, therefore, to feature in many views. One such example is the Lighthouse. The coast hereabouts is treacherous, and in the great storm of 1627, 32 ships were wrecked off Orford Ness. Successive lighthouses collapsed under pressure from the surging sea and erosion. The present lighthouse was privately built in 1792 by Lord Braybrooke and subsequently taken over by Trinity House in 1837. It was decommissioned in 2013 due to severe beach erosion. Its time is limited. Orford Ness remains a place of intriguing paradox. Here, today, nature is encouraged and protected upon an area of land where, for half a century, one species, that of mankind, sought ways to annihilate more of its own, and by result poison the very fabric of the planet upon which we all depend for sustenance. Evidence of this sad litany, tempered with rays of enlightenment, can be discovered to this day upon this tormented land.